Great to be back, Nick, for the second video in our short series where we're discussing the evolution and the future of financial advice and the value chain. Obviously, last session it was really good to cover the overview of the value chain, how financial advisor businesses are valued, and it was great to question actually whether we think, and there's a case for saying that perhaps how those businesses are valued is a little bit out of sync when you consider how the other components of the chain get valued themselves. But I thought in this session it would be really good if we could cover the current setup, broadly speaking, of financial advice businesses, and I think it would be really good as well to touch on where we think this direction is heading and what the future could hold, so how those components of the value chain all interact with each other. I thought it would be very interesting to use your experience over the last sort of 25 years or so, an insight into how has that evolved, how have advisors evolved into the shape they are today and how they operate today, and crucially how those components of the value chain have also evolved over the last couple of decades. So I thought it'd be really interesting to sort of kick off with that.
Many of the advisors watching this will be very aware of what I'm about to say, but I think let's go back anyway. In the beginning of financial advisors, in kind of the sort of late 70s, early 80s, the majority of financial advisors worked for either banks or insurance companies, and there were a small number of independent financial advisors, but actually, primarily these were the main conduits of financial advice. A famous man from an insurance company, is a very important part in the evolution of financial advice, because that got the habit of people saving for retirement, saving for future needs, and I think that's a really, really important part of that. And many of the advisors, that I talked to today started out from that background, and that has a real important bearing on how they view things, very passionate about supporting their clients. But actually what happened then was there were a number of kind of scandals, and people do look back on that period with some disdain, but I absolutely don't. I look back on it as a period where kind of financial advice really started to blossom. And because of some of the challenges that were faced by those banks and building societies, they left the space. So what that allowed was all these advisors, these great people that were caring about their clients, to actually almost didn't have a job, but actually were able to take their clients with them. And what they did is they then left there and set up financial advice businesses. So there were three kind of ways those advisors left. They set up kind of three different types of businesses, actually. Some advisors went to set up a business on their own. They were called sole traders, and they set themselves up as sole traders. Others went to kind of with a collection of their friends. So maybe 3, 4, 5 people, or even just sometimes 1 or 2, would set up a partnership, and that was their own independent business. And other people wanted to join a larger organisation where they felt, comfort in the crowds. So effectively, what you had was networks, sole traders, and partnerships. This is kind of how it's been, probably for the last 25 years. Certainly, the majority of the time, I've been in the industry. But what we're starting to see is a shift, I think, in the last few years, where in fact, if they were the kind of the 3 ones area, you are still seeing is kind of consolidators, acquirers, DFMs, and networks, kind of as one group. And I think a lot of the sole traders, there are fewer and fewer sole traders, are kind of often morphing into and being acquired into those organizations. But what we're seeing is the split is kind of to those types of firms, and then what I would call kind of profitable regional businesses. A lot of those firms have explored being bought, have explored, potentially selling their business, and in fact have decided they want to carry on as they are. And what's exciting is both those groups, so those kind of are actually trying to optimize their businesses. So both of them are looking at kind of efficiencies. So if you look at your consolidators, a lot of those are exploring, how do you use that scale to get, to potentially build their own platforms, to build their own investment solutions and so on. And what we're starting to see a lot more is, of course, those profitable, successful regional advice businesses are actually really starting to thrive and kind of optimize themselves in a different way. Now, what does the future look like? I don't exactly know. None of us do with the crystal ball, but I think the exciting part for us to explore really is how can those firms both those types of firms kind of optimize themselves for a future that's maybe a question mark. We don't know what it is, but the one thing we do know is financial advice is alive and well. But of course, like all things, they need to kind of adapt and evolve.
I think the profitability is a really important point, and I know you and I agree quite strongly on this. We shouldn't shy away from the fact that advisor businesses making good profits is a great thing. Profitable financial advice businesses are able to service and deliver the value back to the clients. And I think there is no problem at all in hiding away from the fact that driving efficiencies and increasing profit in those businesses is really important and something that we should be talking about more.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think when we think about financial advisors, they're in a unique position, as I mentioned in the earlier video, of holding the relationship with a client and a family for an extended period of time. And that relationship with the financial advisor is not a 1-2 year thing. This can be a 5, 10, 15, 25, multi-generational relationship over time. So I think it's so important that these businesses are viable for the long term, because we know the value of advice is high. We know the impact of that. We all have personal experiences of it ourselves, where in grief, advisors are sorting out the financial problems. These things are huge. And when you're in these difficult times, the value of that financial advisor being around for the long term is just so high, and it means so much to so many people, I think. They have to be around. They have to make money, otherwise they're not going to do that. The crucial part is clearly not to the detriment of the clients, but they also advisors need to be paid fees, so I think it's really, really important that they are profitable, and we would look, I think, as we're very much focused on helping those advisors, but crucially, not to the detriment of the client.
Absolutely right. And one of the things that I really enjoy about my job is speaking to different financial advice businesses about how they are adapting their business models to ensure they remain profitable, to increase their margins, to better service their clients. Some of the really interesting evolutions that I'm seeing and speaking to firms is an actual condensing of the CIP. I had a very interesting conversation with an advisor recently who said, actually, if you go back 15, 20 years, to prove your independence meant you had to have a vast range of products on your CIP from a range of different providers. But actually, as time has progressed, it's become apparent that it's cumbersome and quite difficult to manage. I'm seeing a lot of action where advisors are really consolidating their CIP. They're still fully independent. They still oversee who they obviously put onto that CIP. Technology is another really interesting one. So we know there's a big rise in the white labeling of investment platforms and other parts of the financial services business, again, to really embrace and use technology to increase their scalability. And again, we can talk about Zoom and remote meetings. Face-to-face is still important, but again, the advisor can do more meetings, can help more people. And obviously, there's a well-known phrase in life that no one knows the future, but there's only sort of two certainties, and those being death and taxes. I think actually if we look at financial advice and financial services, we'll add a third into there for another certainty, which is regulation.
Interesting you bring up regulation. Of course, there's the Blackfinch's consumer duty champion, but what would you, concisely, would you be able to kind of articulate kind of the key areas?
Definitely, you're right. I mean, there's tons of content out there about consumer duty, but I think what really are the principles of the duty? It's absolutely putting the client front and centre and demonstrating you've done so. That isn't going anywhere. I think that direction of travel to absolutely ensure the client fully understands what the product does, what they're paying for it, what the risks are that are involved with that product, are they getting value from it? All of those, the concept of the consumer duty from that angle, absolutely couldn't agree more with. And I think nobody in the industry would disagree that that's a bad thing. I would struggle to find anyone in the industry today that would say, actually, no, I think the principles of consumer duty are bad. Yeah, we can all talk about the implementation of that and the different nuances. But I think when we look to the future, we know regulation's absolutely going nowhere. And look over the last 10 to 15 years, the path of regulation has taken. It really has. Every single iteration has pulled the client understanding more and more into the centre. I actually think that's a great thing because, again, we can use some of the technological advances that we've kind of touched on to help advisor firms deliver things like consumer duty and future regulations that are definitely going to be coming in. So we use that as a general direction of travel, and certainly when we're looking at the products that we manufacture and design, building those concepts in and that general direction of travel I think is vital, and we're well on board with that. Actually, Nick, just playing that through and thinking about your experience and your role, conversations you're having with advisors, just wondering if you wouldn't mind touching on the areas that you think are most important to bring the value back into the advice businesses to future-proof those businesses.
So I want to make it clear from the outset, obviously, I work for an investment management company and I'm not a financial advisor. So what I really want to do, happy to do, is share with you some of the great things I've seen really successful financial advisor businesses do, and what are they looking to do to protect themselves going forward. So I'm happy to share, obviously, some of those. So I think the first one is many of these firms are really focused on kind of recapturing the value or bringing the value back into the business. What does that mean? It sounds like jargon, but really it's looking at their business and optimizing at every level. So if you start looking at different parts of it, if you're looking at the platform you're using, if you're looking at the investment solution you're using, you're looking at the back office system you're using, looking at all of these and trying to get make sure you've got the best version or you've got the most cost-effective solution. These sorts of things really need to take place across every part of the business. So really the idea of bringing that value back in. So again, a lot of people are thinking about I always think about scale. Like an old version of independence would have been, I need to use multiple products or multiple platforms as a justification of independence. What we're seeing the most successful businesses do is in fact look at every part of that and seeing actually, if I were a scale business, if I had 50 million or 100 million or 200 million, could I negotiate better fees to benefit my clients? Unfortunately, capitalist system works that way, that the person with 100 million gets better pricing, which ultimately, gets passed on to clients. So I think really that kind of bring the value back, optimizing that, really, really important. I think I'll focus on a segment of that in a minute, which I call, really focus on kind of centralized investment propositions, because that's what we're seeing, huge change there and a real, it's quite a really exciting kind of moment I think in the industry. But I'll come back to that in a second. I think the other things, so recapturing the value, I think, as I said, improving the tech, I think it's really important. I think those advisors have got a handle on demonstrating the value of their advice. The question not from clients about, what value did you bring to me? Because we know, clients do value that. But the ones that are future-proofing their businesses are thinking, we might start to get our fees questions. Technology could involve. I might be competing with an algorithm in certain parts of the portfolio. Nobody believes that an algorithm is going to replace an advisor, but what it could do is, maybe take 30 or 40% of what's actually being done by a financial advisor. So those that are really focused on demonstrating the value, and that could be, it could be the way they questioning techniques. It could be they could do additional services. They could be doing lots of things within it. There's multiple different ways they can do that. But really that demonstrating value piece, those most successful businesses I've seen are doing that. But I guess I mentioned the centralized investment proposition again. Advisors historically would have, those that have decided to outsource, which again, a lot of the most successful forward-looking future-proof businesses, tend to have outsourced their investment solutions. But what they've typically done is outsourced to a number of different outsourced fund providers. And the challenge with that means that there are multiple products, which means it's very difficult to optimize when you have 5, 6 or 7 outsourced solutions. It's completely different. So the ability to do that, and to kind of consolidate that into one overarching investment solution, people are actually realizing the brand of the financial advisor is important. Now I go back 5, 10 years, and if we talked about advisors having brand in their investment or platform solutions, you've kind of been met with those kind of, yeah, okay, it's great to talk to you, but come back another time. But actually what you're seeing now is, and we're seeing this a lot in maybe a solution that we'll talk about in our next session, is we're seeing a lot of firms actually use their brand as part of the naming within their investment solutions. Is really that idea, focus on recapturing the value. Second part is really that idea of kind of demonstrating the value to the clients. Thirdly, kind of optimization, really investing, not in a marketing campaign, but investing in the brand, because the brand of the advisor is the bit that we know the clients value.
No, really, really interesting, Nick, actually, and something I feel quite privileged to be party of and actually be part of these conversations with advisor business owners is, what are other firms doing to capture opportunities, to maximise on opportunities to, again, increase their profitability, margin, scalability. And I'm seeing a really encouraging uptake in firms sharing ideas. Ultimately, what this has led to, as you well know, is the input into the design of our newly launched tailored portfolio service. And I feel very strongly about the fact that this proposition is absolutely positioned to help these firms extract more value from their businesses and also ensure that they are well positioned to continue serving their clients as we go into the next stage of the financial service value chain.
Absolutely, and just to really emphasise as well, we always talk about this, and I know because we talk about this all the time, that combination of kind of extracting the value, but always with that focus on the client's best interest and ensuring we can lower the fees, and that's something, as you know, in the solutions we'll be talking about in the next video that I think in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely.